If you're familiar with the Dragon Ball manga, then I'm sure you're aware that Akira Toriyama has drawn some amazing covers. This applies to both the collected volume covers and, of course, the individual chapter covers as well. Just to prove my point, I present to you this chapter cover. Okay, granted, this isn't one of his best covers, but I would argue it's one of his most interesting covers. So this is the cover for chapter 150 of the Dragon Ball manga. This chapter was published in November of 1987, and it takes place during the Demon King Piccolo saga. However, you wouldn't be able to guess that because there's no Goku, there's no Demon King Piccolo, and there's none of the usual characters you might expect to see on a Dragon Ball manga cover. Instead, what you see at the center of the page is a caricature of Akira Toriyama, drawn by Akira Toriyama. In the illustration, you can see that Toriyama is holding a stick with a bag attached to the end, and he's holding that bag against his head. Although I can't say for sure what's in the bag, it seems like it's probably ice, and you'll see why I think that in just a moment. Aside from that, you can see that he's wearing what in Japanese is called a dotera. This is a type of Japanese kimono-ish jacket. It's insulated, so it's great for cold weather. And of course, you can also see that he's seated at a table, although this isn't a normal table. This is a type of Japanese table called a kotatsu.
Kotatsu are Japanese low tables that have a heater inside and a futon or blanket to trap in the heat so you could be warm while sitting.
On the table, you can see his inkwell and paper, so it looks like he's in the middle of drawing manga. And you can also see that there's a cup with some liquid in it. I'll explain what that liquid is in just a moment. And then at the bottom of the page, you can see that there's a cute little cat sleeping and enjoying the warmth of the kotatsu. But why did we get this weird cover page? The answer to that can be found in the text that you see written all over this page. So this text all over the cover page is a message for readers written by Toriyama himself. Obviously, this is all in Japanese, but don't worry if you can't read Japanese, because I took the time to translate all of it. So here is what Toriyama wrote. Apology. It's rather pathetic, but I ended up catching a cold. My fever has finally come down, and I'm able to think clearly again. But I still have a horrible ache throughout my entire body that is driving me crazy. Somehow I was able to complete this chapter despite not even being able to move my hands. And here we move to the right side of the page. But when I got to this cover page, I completely ran out of energy. All I was able to produce was this sloppy page. I think the chapter also has some unsightly bits. I ask for your forgiveness. Next week's edition is gonna be awesome though. Or, well, that's what I'm hoping. Toriyama. The message that Toriyama wrote here is a reminder of a couple things. First, it reminds us how brutal the life of a manga artist can be. And two, it's a reminder of just how amazing Toriyama was. The fact that he could draw an entire chapter of the Dragon Ball manga while he could barely move his hands. His entire body was hurting, and he was running a fever so high that he had to have ice packs on his head. That is crazy. But there's still more text on the page, so let's keep going. Over here on the left side, there's a speech bubble coming from Toriyama. In the speech bubble, it says, Tohoho. This is basically the equivalent of something like sheesh or oh brother. It's Toriyama expressing his exasperation at the fact that he wasn't able to put out a proper cover page. And then over on the right, this text is about that cup of liquid that I mentioned earlier. This reads, honey ginger tea. It tastes awful, but it works. Now here I'm going to have to disagree with Toriyama. I've had honey ginger tea many times when I've been sick, and I actually quite like it. But maybe Toriyama was using some recipe that I've never heard of and doesn't taste as good as what I've had. I will agree though that honey ginger tea can really help when you're sick. And then here at the bottom we have one last chunk of text. But I'm not going to tell you what Toriyama wrote here, at least not right now. I'm going to do that at the end of the video. Because it's been several minutes, this is still the intro, and that last chunk of text is actually related to the main topic of today's video. So join me on this edition of Dragon Ball Dictionary as we take a deep dive into Karin, or is it Korin? Hey guys, Tony here, and I'm back from Japan. If you want to hear about my trip to Japan, check out the Japan Station podcast. I'm going to be talking all about the trip in an upcoming episode. However, today we're back to the usual content, Dragon Ball stuff. And don't worry, I will get to the Dragon Ball stuff in just a moment. But before I do that, I have to tell you a quick little story about something that happened to me in Japan. And that specific thing is what inspired me to talk about the thing that I'm going to be talking about today. As some of you may know, the reason why I went to Japan recently was to walk across a part of the country. I walked across most of Yamaguchi Prefecture and Kyushu Island, over 500 kilometers, despite the fact that I am legally blind. Now, here's where the story starts. So while I was doing this, I got contacted by a local TV station in Yamaguchi Prefecture. They wanted to do a news story about me. And so they came out and they filmed a thing with me. It was on YouTube and it was broadcast also on TV. It's a short little thing, nothing huge, but it was my first time on Japanese TV.
2年間で東京から岩国市までのおよそ900キロを歩き、先月末からは再び岩国をスタートし、鹿児島までのおよそ500キロに挑んでいます。
Anyway, when that was broadcast in Yamaguchi Prefecture, somebody, I guess in Yamaguchi, saw it and then they contacted their friend in Tokyo and they told that friend, oh, I think you would find this person interesting. I won't get into all the details, but basically that other person in Tokyo ended up contacting me. We ended up meeting in Tokyo, we had dinner, and then they gave me a present. That present was something called Karinto. And yes, this is related to Karin, the Dragon Ball character, but let me explain what Karinto is first, and then we'll get to Karin. Karinto is a Japanese snack. It's deep fried and it's made of flour, yeast, and brown sugar. What you're seeing on screen right now is some of the Karinto that I got. As you can see, they're individually wrapped and they come in multiple flavors. However, the standard flavor is brown sugar. These Karinto are quite round, but usually they're more of a cylindrical shape. I know outside of Japan you don't see Karinto all that much, but if you're into this kind of thing, I recommend you try it out. They're quite good. Anyway, it's finally time to talk about Dragon Ball! Yes, you made it through the long, boring story about Japanese snacks! Alright, so let's talk about Karin. Yes, this is related to the whole Karinto thing, otherwise I would not have brought it up. So Karin, or Karin-sama, or Korin in the English dub, is the wise martial arts master cat that lives atop Karin Tower. As I'm sure you know, he makes his first appearance during the Red Ribbon Army saga, and he's the guy that is responsible for the senzu beans. As for the origin of Karin's name, that is actually really, really simple. Except it's not, because when you look it up in English and when you look it up in Japanese, there's a very good chance that you're gonna get two different answers. When you look up the origin of Karin's name in English, you'll come across many websites that claim that Karin is derived from the Japanese name for the Chinese quince, a type of fruit. However, when you do the same search in Japanese, you come across websites and people saying that Karin's name comes from the name of the tower, Karin Tower. And you also come across a Toriyama quote that backs that up. I'm paraphrasing here, but essentially in that quote, Toriyama says Karin's name comes from Karin Tower, and Karin Tower comes from Karinto. So let me explain the pun here so that you really understand what's going on here. In Japanese, the word for tower is to. Note that's an elongated vowel. It's not to, it's to-o. Put that together and you get to. So in Japanese, many towers are named something to. For example, in Japanese, the Eiffel Tower is called the Eiffelturm.
エッフェル塔にやってきました。
Given that Toriyama explicitly said that he got the name Karin from the name of the tower, we can conclude that Toriyama first thought of the tower and then he named the character based on the name he gave the tower. But here's a question. Why would Toriyama name the tower Karinto? Because that's a damn good pun. So let's put ourselves in Toriyama's shoes for just a moment in order to understand his thought process. You decide that you're going to introduce a tower into the story of Dragon Ball. You decide that Goku is going to climb that tower and meet some kind of hermit or martial arts master at the top of the tower. And then he comes down powered up and defeats whatever the villain is going to be. It turns out that villain was Tao Pai Pai, but who knows if Toriyama had decided that yet when he first came up with the idea of the tower. Well, then in that case, the name of the tower is going to be something to, something tower. Let's think of the name of a food that ends in to with an elongated vowel. Yes, Karinto. So Karinto, the food, ends in to. Yes, it has that elongated vowel. Even though it's actually written differently, it's pronounced the same way. And then you have Karinto the tower. It's read the same way. Even though you can see on screen right now, they're not written the same way. So to me, this is one of the best puns in all of Dragon Ball because it actually has two meanings. It is a very punny pun. Compare this to names like Yamcha, Ulan, Pu'er, Shu, Mai, Pilaf. Yes, all those names are derived from Chinese food and tea. They're not really puns in the truest sense of the word. They're just silly, fun names. Karinto, on the other hand, has those two meanings. So this is a wonderful play on words, and it's the kind of pun that would knock out King Kai. Anyway, so everything starts with this pun. So when Toriyama was deciding, okay, well, this tower is named Karinto, well then what am I gonna name the hermit that lives at the top of the tower? Oh wait, Karin Tower, right? So I guess this character is gonna be named Karin. So as far as I can tell, there's no concrete evidence out there that confirms that Karin's name came from the name of that fruit, the Chinese quince. Every single Japanese source that I've come across makes it very clear Karin got his name from the name of the tower. I was only able to find one Japanese website that said there's a theory that Karin got his name from the name of the fruit. However, the prevailing theory is that Karin got his name from the name of the tower. Add to that the fact that Toriyama himself said that Karin got his name from the name of Karin Tower, and I think it's pretty safe to say that Toriyama first thought of the name for the tower, and then he decided, well, it only makes sense that Karin is the name of the guy that lives on the tower. And yes, Karin is a fruit, but that's just a coincidence. Unfortunately, these English websites like Dragon Ball Wiki don't present it in this way. And that is problematic at best, if not outright just wrong. What about Karin's English name? So when Funimation brought over Dragon Ball Z to the US, they gave him a different name, Korin. Now, I'm not a fan of Korin. There's worse things Funimation has done, so it bothers me, but it doesn't bother me as much as other stuff. I just think that this change was absolutely needless. It's not like Karin is all that confusing or difficult to read. The only explanation that I can come up with is that they thought Karin sounded too much like Karen, so it sounded like a girl's name. So if that was a concern, my idea would be to just pronounce it Korin, and you have all of the voice actors read the name as Korin. That would make the name more unique, and it would help distinguish it from Karen. And by the way, Karin-sama, that is what I think every character in Dragon Ball calls Karin. If you can think of an exception, let me know down in the comments. But sama is just a name suffix. It's often translated as master or lord, but basically it's just a way to show respect. As for that last chunk of text that I teased in the intro, well, I'm not going to talk about that yet. But what you can do right now is hit that like button and the subscribe button if you're enjoying the video. Okay, so there's one more thing I want to talk about before we get back to that cover page, and it's related to something that Karin says. But let me begin by asking you a question. Why is Karin a cat? Well, actually, Karin isn't really a cat because, according to Daizenshu 7, he came from Otherworld, and Toriyama originally colored his fur blue. Yes, that is all true, but let's set aside those details because for all intents and purposes, Karin is a cat. So again, Toriyama could have chosen to make Karin anything, but he specifically chose to make him a cat. There's a couple reasons for this. The big reason is Toriyama liked to subvert reader expectations, often for the sake of comedy. When Goku first meets Karin, most people who are reading the manga or watching the anime were expecting to see a human martial arts master. In other words, another sennin, like Master Roshi. As you probably know, one of the names that Master Roshi goes by in the original Japanese is Kame Sennin, Turtle Hermit. In a sense, this is just a title. This is typically translated as Turtle Hermit. Kame means turtle, and sennin, well, like I said, it's usually translated as hermit, and that's a valid translation, but sennin is a really interesting word, and there's a whole lot more we can say about it. So let's break it down. The term sennin traces its origins back to China, specifically back to Taoism. Sennin is made up of two kanji characters. The second one is the simple one, it just means person. The first one is the one that carries the real meaning here. When you look up what this means in Japanese, it says someone who has gone to the mountains and mastered immortality. And in a very general sense, like what we see in Dragon Ball, it's also used to refer to these wise, sage, master type characters who have mystical powers. Anyway, after Goku climbs up Karin Tower and meets Karin for the first time, Karin describes himself as a senbyo. Literally, this means hermit cat. So sen is that same character from sennin, but byo is an alternate reading of the kanji for cat. The standard reading for the kanji character for cat in Japanese is neko. However, when you use it in a compound like this, you read it a different way, and that's why we get senbyo. So this is a joke, and Karin himself is a big joke. It's acknowledging that everybody was expecting a sennin, but instead Toriyama gave us a senbyo, a hermit cat. And by the way, this joke works better in Japanese. I'm not saying it's not funny in English, I'm saying that there's an extra element of wordplay, because Toriyama created a new kanji compound word with a novel reading. So when a Japanese person reads senbyo in the manga or hears it in the anime, there's an extra little something there that clicks. Whereas in the English, it's just two words put together, but there's no real wordplay there. So that very clearly shows that Toriyama's intent with Karin is to use him as a joke. Everybody was expecting another old master, but instead, what they got was an over 800-year-old cute cat. So that explains why Karin isn't human, but it doesn't really explain why Toriyama chose to make him a cat. Now, we don't have an explicit answer to that question, but the cover of chapter 150 kind of answers the question. So let's finally go back to that last chunk of text I've been teasing the entire video. But before I read to you what Toriyama said in that text, let me give you a little bit of context. This chunk of text is about the sleeping cat that you see at the bottom of the page. This is Toriyama's pet cat. Its name is Koge. Koge means something like burnt or scorched. By the way, it can also mean the crispy burnt rice that you sometimes get when you cook rice. As you can see, this cat is a brown color, so probably what happened is when Toriyama and or his wife got this cat, they decided to name it Koge because of the brown color. It looks like it was slightly burnt. So now that you know the name of the cat, we can get into this last bit of text. Here's what it says. Koge, overjoyed due to the kotatsu, which was taken out of storage unexpectedly early. Koge is so carefree. By the way, I looked at Koge's sleeping face when I drew Karin. So basically Toriyama is saying here, number one, the reason why Karin's eyes always look like they're shut is because he based Karin's design on that of his sleeping cat. And two, the reason why Karin is a cat, well, it seems to be that Toriyama was just looking around his room, saw his cat sleeping. He said, oh, I guess that would make for a good sennin. Oh, sorry, a senbyo. I think that's as simple as it is. He just needed to draw something. And he thought, oh, okay, I don't want to make it a human. What should I do? Oh, my cat. All right, I'll draw my cat. And he actually kind of did this for Beerus as well, because Beerus was also based on another one of his cats. So Toriyama just liked to draw his cats. So look, as I close out this video, let me get serious for just a moment. Karin, Korin, senbyo, Whatever, none of these matter, because this character has one more name, and this is the true name of this character. To not use this name would be disrespectful not just to this character, but also to Toriyama. So hopefully after watching this video, you'll join me and you'll decide to never use those names again. Instead, from this day forward, you will only refer to this character as Whiskers the Wonder Cat.
I've been told many things. My favorite is Whiskers the Wonder Cat.